So I wake up in my younger body and it's 1993. Yes, somehow I managed to do a Days of Future Past to myself last night. And I wake up and I'm 8 years old. And it's a time when a young, charismatic, dynamic Bill Clinton, all the way from Arkansas, baby, was the President of the United States of America. And it was the beginning of the carefree 90s. A time when the dinosaur craze had gone into overdrive thanks to the success of Jurassic Park, and also a time when a young man had a question that we all needed to have answered. What is love? Baby, don't hurt me. Don't hurt me no more. I apologise for ruining that song for you, by the way. But what was going on inside our little bubble, our little world of professional wrestling? Lots of things had happened, as you know. There had been a lot of drug testing, a lot of steroid allegations, a lot of information coming out about the drugs in the WWF and in wrestling in general. Wrestlers' physiques were getting smaller. Wrestlers were getting smaller. You had guys like Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels and the 1-2-3 Kid now getting opportunities as a result. The Hulk Hogan era was slowly phasing out and we were ushering into a new era. And this is going to be the topic of discussion for this video, because in 1993, we did have Bret Hart as the champion, and then in came a monster Hawaiian pretending to be a Japanese wrestler called Yokozuna, who became the WWF champion at WrestleMania, and then it led to what I really want to talk about, and that was the summer of Lex. Yes, indeed, the Lex Express, the run of Lex Luger. And this topic was really inspired by somebody down at wrestling forums called Arrogantly Grateful. He did a thread and it inspired me to make this video, and I want to talk about it because it's something that I don't think has been spoken about in a format like YouTube. So I am going to talk about it, how I remember it as a 8-year-old, at that time, and now looking back on further reflection as to why it didn't work. And I really hope that you do not knock on my door, by the way, because I will throw this guitar at you. Back to the topic at hand. So, 90s, 93, Bret Hart was the king of the ring, obviously. That was to soften the blow, probably because Hogan had won the belt. And then in the summer, they were building up Yoko as this monster that no one could lift off of his feet. And they were talking about who is going to be the guy to do it. And I remember being a kid, and Crush tried to do it. I think Randy Savage tried to do it. Tatanka tried to do it. All these options. Really, what you could see is that they were looking to have that 90s equivalent to Hogan slamming Andre. However, this time there was no Hogan, there was no Andre. So in a sense, Yoko was the Andre for that generation, or for that time period. And they needed someone to play the role of Hulk Hogan, the next big American hero, because the pro-American stance gets the fans going at that time. And they tried with lots of different people who were trying to lift Yoko off, who could take down this monster. He just beat Hogan not that long ago for the WWF title at King of the Ring. Bret Hart was so far out of the picture at that time, it was just like, well, Bret's clearly not going to get back in the picture. So you have this run with Yoko as the monster, this anti-American heel monster. And as time goes by, they do one last run at the summit, and this is where whoever is going to accept Yoko's challenge is going to be the hero and going to be the guy that does it. And I remember Crush tried doing it and he pulled his back out and he couldn't do it. And then Randy Savage was going to try and do it, and then it didn't happen, and then it looked like that was going to be it. But lo and behold, a helicopter from the heavens comes flying down to the summit. And I'll tell you what, as a kid, my first thought was that Hulk Hogan was coming back to take on the almighty Yokozuna. So you can imagine my face when out comes Lex Luger, who not too long before was a heel in the WWF, the narcissistic Lex Luger character who would stand in front of mirrors and juggle his his pecs at the mirror. The man that knocked Bret Hart out at a WWF press conference. This man is now a pro-American, American-loving babyface. Comes out in the American t-shirt, the jeans, the cowboy boots, challenges Yoko. Fuji comes in to interfere. If essentially he body slams Yokozuna, And now you have the next big challenger for the WWF Championship, the next great American WWF superstar, the guy that's going to transcend wrestling and bring back the fans and unite the people. And WWF, they went all out. Let's not forget that Lex Express. That was a big campaign. I think they probably spent as much money as presidents spend on their own political campaigns. It really had that feel to it as Lex Luger was going from town to town for his call to action to inspire young Americans in his fight against the evil foreign invader Yokozuna. And on paper, you would ask yourself, well, it's got to work. Think about the times. You know, the bodybuilding craze is still at its height at that time. Lex Luger has an amazing physique for, you know, someone that was apparently clean at that time. Good looking guy, tall, great physique, well spoken, articulate. You know, the guy that's just slammed Yokozuna. In the WWF's mind, they probably felt that they had a younger, stronger, more athletic Hulk Hogan. And then SummerSlam comes and they put all the balloons out there. You've got all the confetti coming down. You've got this big match feel that Lex Luger, after all this promotion and all this campaign and all of these things, and him shaking hands with kids and kissing babies and hugging old women and showing up at Burger King, which was a personal joke to me because, come on, let's face it, Lex Luger never ate in Burger King. Let's be real. Could you imagine him eating in Burger King with that physique? Absolutely not. I can imagine Bray Wyatt eating in Burger King, but I can't imagine Lex Luger. But after all this campaign, you have this big match, Luger and Yokozuna, SummerSlam. You have Aaron Neville, the R&B singer, come out and sing the American National Anthem. You have Randy Savage come out to escort him. You have the real us versus them feel as Luger comes walking to the ring as the American hero, and the match happens. And I, as an 8-year-old kid, I'm just watching, very excited, in very excited fashion, just glued to the TV screen, watching what's going on. The match progresses, and then the match ends, and Lex Luger wins by countout, but doesn't win the WWF Championship. And to me, that was one of the many factors as to why the Lex Luger run never caught on in the way that it did. Yes, the first thing I'm going to say is, by Lex Luger not winning the WWF Championship after all of this promotion and all of this campaign and all of this money and marketing and push thrown into him, you would expect that this superheroic Captain America of the WWF, the next Hulk Hogan, the guy that's supposed to have the pivotal moment beating the foreign invader like Hogan had with with the Iron Sheik, Hogan slamming Andre. It's like they tried to create both moments in the space of a short amount of time. You would think that after all of that, he would come out on top and triumph, and he would be our WWF champion, but it never happened. And going back, watching it now, with everything that happened, it felt like a very hollow victory to me. You know, after seeing all of that, in a weird way, I'd almost kind of feel a bit scammed out of seeing, after paying, thinking I'm going to see somebody win the WWF belt, and then you get a count-out victory. And to me, it just kind of took a lot of the momentum out of the whole Lex Express campaign. To be honest with you, the Lex Express ran out of gas pretty much when he didn't win the belt. And yes, you know, you've got all the fans cheering, and I was even saying, so I was watching that match, and yeah, the fans were clearly behind Lex. Not as strongly as you would think, but behind him enough. And maybe if he had won the WWF Championship, fans would have been even more behind him. You also have to think that what was the follow-up after that? I don't really remember much other than him wrestling Ludwig Borger and a Survivor Series match. But by the time you got out of Survivor Series, I felt a lot of that momentum was gone. Going back, watching it then. It was just like, what happened? Now if we break it down and we go real deep into it and we think about some of the other factors that probably had an effect on as to why Lex didn't catch on in that 90s generation, here's my thing. They tried to make him the next Hulk Hogan. They tried to make him the Captain America of the 90s. They tried to make him the next big star. But you just remember this. A few months before, he was a heel. He was a narcissistic, heel. I think he even had Bobby Heenan with him at one point. But he was a heel. He was an unlikable heel. And it was so quick and so sudden when he turned into a babyface. It was literally overnight. You got to wonder how much of that had an effect on the whole momentum of the Lex Luger character going forward. You also have to take this into account. And I will say this, and I'm defending Hogan. In trying to make him the next Hogan, you see where his flaws were. He wasn't as warm or as charismatic or as likable or as super heroic or had the presence of a Hulk Hogan. In some respects, he was probably a pale imitation. Lex was not being the closest form of himself. He was kind of being someone else. And if you watch interviews with Lex, especially the kayfabe commentaries one, Lex even said it. He didn't buy into the whole American hero Lex Luger incarnation that was being brought into WWF TV. He himself did not buy into it. He only started to buy into it when he saw saw the reaction and he heard the people. He only just started to buy into it then. And maybe that was part of the problem, because if you do watch those promos and if you do watch those interviews, the fire and the inspiration in the speeches was just not there. I mean, they were good, they were well executed, but they were just not there. I think the best aspect of that whole promotion really was that, I can't believe I'm saying it, but that hilarious music video of him going, "I'll be your hero, I'll be your hero." That hilarious music video was probably the best part of it. Maybe because Lex wasn't talking in it, probably, I don't know. But it just seemed to be the most effective thing, because that was the one thing that got me on board as a child, was when they did that video, and I was like getting all like, "Oh, I want Lex to win," but then he didn't win. That was probably one of the most effective things, but his individual performances were not, they could have gone to a next level. And apparently that was a criticism behind the scenes, that they felt that Lex didn't kick it up a notch. Insiders were saying that in the 80s they'd seen Lex in there with guys like Ric Flair and Brian Pillman, and they saw the in-ring performances that he had with those guys, feeling that he was very motivated to keep up with them, and they felt that he needed to bring some of that into his feud with Yokozuna. And if I'm being honest with you, yeah, I watched that match with Yokozuna and it was fine, but it wasn't as dynamic and as fired up as that you would imagine, considering what was on the line within the context of the story. The American hero standing up for America against the evil invader. You would expect so much more from Lex Luger, so much more fire and passion, and that was very much lacking. You also have to look at the state of things to come. At that time, wrestlers were getting smaller, they're more athletic, more skilled, more well-crafted, more well-versed in a variety of styles. Those kind of wrestlers were on the rise, and fans had been exposed to it more and more in mainstream America, in mainstream wrestling television. And you had guys like Bret the Hitman Hart and Shawn Michaels and the 1-2-3 Kid. You had veterans like Macho Man Randy Savage, guys who were so damn good in the ring that when you saw someone like a Lex Luger, it was kind of a come down. And we had been exposed to these matches and these performances and Owen Hart and all of these guys, that I think that played a role as to why the Lex thing didn't catch on. And then you look at the follow-up, and obviously, as I've said, there was no follow-up. There was nothing after that. And then apparently they said, well, I can reheat this whenever I want. And the problem is, he didn't reheat it. Any momentum he had was pretty much diminished, and he didn't do enough to kind of reheat it. And obviously, by the time we got to the Royal Rumble in 1994, you had the tie with Bret and Lex, and the fans sided more with Bret than they did with Lex, and Bret Hart surpassed him. So when you think about it, the American hero that the WWF wanted in Lex Luger actually became the Canadian Bret the Hitman Hart. And then after that, what happened with Lex Luger? He formed a tag team with the British Bulldog called the Allied Powers, and he did not do much. To be honest, he did not do very much after that. He kind of was just treading water not long after that, and that's what happened. And obviously, just to wrap up my points, the performances were not as fired up as you needed them to be. He wasn't as dynamic in ring in comparison to the guys that were on the rise, and he did not have the warmth and the likability and the charm of a Hulk Hogan. And the fact is, in a sense, he was playing a pale imitation of the Hulkster. And that to me is probably most of the reasons as to why the whole Lex Luger run in the 90s didn't work. And it's a shame, because you have all of that money and the Lex Express and the music video and all of that stuff put into him, but it didn't work. If they had done it with someone else, I think it could have worked. Maybe if they had continued with Bret Hart, it could have worked. I think the only other person that could have played the American hero angle very, very well at that time was actually one of Luger's greatest rivals and partners, and that would have been Sting, because Sting had that kind of charisma and he had that kind of fire and he had that kind of passion. And I think had the WWF been able to have signed Sting and introduced Sting in the 90s, I think we'd be having a whole different ball game on our hands to discuss right now. Anyways, that's my point of view. I am done. If you haven't already, hit that like button. If you haven't already, write some comments down below. If you haven't already, share it. And if you haven't already, retweet it. Let me know what you think. Let me know how you feel. Anwar Dawson, I would love to know how you feel, because I know you're more of a wrestling historian than I am. Kyle, if you're out there watching it, let me know how you feel. Chris McGregor, hello my mate, how are you? And I am out of here.